Hello and welcome to the Right to Release Formula Part 1, which is all about rest. So the aim of this formula is to allow you to start to release the things that no longer serve you. So you can spend more time doing the things that you want to do, like getting out in the garden, for example. So in part 1 today, I am going to be specifically talking about 3 things. The first thing is the stress container. What is it? Why do you need to know what it is? And how you can empty it and why you need to empty it. Okay, so that's the first one. The second thing we're going to look at is active rest. Again, what is it and how does it help you? And then the last thing is I'm going to discuss a few ways to rest your busy brain that don't involve you sitting down and trying to meditate or, just doing nothing, because I know that as busy women, we really struggle with that. So the first thing then I'm going to talk to you about is the stress container, and I'm going to try a little demo here. It does involve water and a watering can. So if it all goes Pete Tong, then I apologise. But it's the easiest way that I thought to demonstrate the stress container. So imagine this watering can is your stress container, okay? And this is something that each of us have. Some of us will have a bigger stress container and some of us will have a smaller stress container. I think generally as women, we tend to probably have quite a good a big stress container because we tend to have quite a high tolerance for stress, okay? So imagine that this is your stress container, this watering can, and into it goes all the things in life that cause you stress. So if we think about some of those things, it might be work, for example. So I'm just going to pour work into here. Okay, God, this is going everywhere. So that's work. It might be money. You might be stressed about money, so pour a bit of that in. It might be that you have experienced trauma in your life. That will definitely contribute. Oh, it's getting a bit full now. I hope you can see that. It might be that you have lost someone recently, so pour that in. Okay, we've overflowed there. Okay, so it's when the stress container overflows that we start to have real issues, and that's when we start to exhibit behaviors of stress. So for me personally, this is things like being really emotional and teary, crying a lot, being really snappy at my husband and daughter and those close to me. I'm just going to put this down for a sec. It's coming back in a minute. It's, just being generally quite frustrated and quite angry, actually. But there's a few other things that you might, that are kind of unique to you, and you might not be aware of them. You might be aware of them, but this is all about making you become aware of them. When you are feeling really stressed, what behaviors do you exhibit? So it might be things like you find it really hard to concentrate on. If you've got a task, if you're trying to do something at work, you might struggle to really concentrate on that. You might find it really hard to make a decision because your brain is just so full of all this stress, and your stress container is so overflowing with everything that's going on. It hasn't got the capacity to make that decision. You find yourself consuming more of the things that you use to cope. So more coffee, caffeine, more alcohol, more cigarettes, potentially, more food. I know for me, certainly in the last year, I have 100% eaten my feelings. So that is a big sign for me. If I start to, if I sit down and eat like a whole bag of crisps, like a big grab bag in one go, I start thinking to myself, oh, I think I need to do something about this. Okay. You may feel really, really tired. Even though you've slept, you still feel absolutely shattered. Or you might actually get physical pain in your body. So you might find yourself getting really bad headaches, or you might get, upset stomach as well. So they're just a few of the signs that you can have. I'm just going to check that. There we go. So if you start to notice yourself experiencing any of these, just be really aware of what is happening. Okay. So in order to deal with these stresses, so as our stress container starts to overflow, we develop coping methods. Okay. So some helpful coping methods can act by activating the spout of our watering can here, so our stress container. So if we undertake a helpful coping method such as some mindful gardening, for example, our spout is activated and we release some of the water, and you can see it coming out there and going into a tray. and you've got a nice little gap at the top there for more stress to go in. Brilliant. But it's better than it's overflowing. Hey, it might be that you decide you find going for a run really helps you to release some of that stress, or it might be talking to a friend about your stress as well. So there's some really helpful coping mechanisms. I'm going to just talk about a few more in a bit. But that is, you've reduced there the amount of water in your stress container. So now when more stress comes along, which, let's face it, in life it's going to happen, you've got a bit of space there to fill up. Okay, now I spoke a little bit about some of the signs that crop up when you find yourself feeling stressed, like overeating, for example. So this is a classic one for me. It's really, really common. I think it's been common for a lot of us in lockdown, and there's absolutely no shame in any of these behaviors. They are really normal because your body doesn't know how to cope. So we can exhibit unhelpful coping mechanisms. Okay. So what happens with these, they actually block the spout. So I'm going to stick this bit of stick into the spout, and imagine that is an unhelpful coping mechanism in there. Okay, so they are things like perhaps drinking to excess, overworking. I am 100% one for overworking. I have to put very strict boundaries in for myself. I actually make myself get out in the garden at the end of the day to kind of delineate the end of my working day. And another one is keeping feelings to yourself. Okay, so obviously with that block in there, the water can't escape because you're not, they actually block the spout there. So more stress comes. And even though overeating at the time feels like a great way of relieving stress, actually, it's really not helping you because it's not taking any stress out of your container. So the more stress comes, there's something else there. You've got a few health issues maybe, or you have a row with your husband and some more stress comes and you're just overflowing. And because the only coping mechanisms you're using are those unhealthy ones, the water's got nowhere to go, and therefore your stress container overflows and you never get any better. So even though at the time having a huge glass of wine or a couple, or a whole bottle of wine, or overeating or bottling those feelings up seems like a good idea, actually it's the worst thing that you can do in terms of stress. You really want to be able to employ some of those healthy coping mechanisms in order to release the pressure and allow some of the water out. So by making time for those helpful coping mechanisms means that even as the stresses keep coming, because they will, you're emptying your stress container, and therefore it never overflows and you never get to that point where you're feeling super stressed, and you're exhibiting really intense stress signals. So that's my stress container. There's water everywhere, I'm not going to lie, but I think it was I hope it was quite a good demonstration of what we're dealing with here. And next time you find yourself thinking, oh well, I'll just carry on working for another couple of hours to relieve the stress, actually it's probably one of the worst things that you can do. And by getting out into the garden is going to give you a nice bit of downtime, or talking to somebody about how you're feeling. Just getting those things off your chest can make it so much better. Obviously if you have someone at home that you feel comfortable to speak to, absolutely do that, but obviously I'm always here as well. If you want to have a chat on the DMs with me, then just let me know. The next thing I'm going to talk about then is active rest. What is it and how it can help you? Okay, so active rest sounds like a bit of an oxymoron, doesn't it? Like active and rest in the same sentence, like what is going on there? But as I said before, as really busy women, we quite often find it difficult to sit and do nothing when we're trying to rest, because our brains are used to going at 100 miles an hour. So active rest is a really, really good way to allow our brains to rest while still doing something that keeps them a little bit active. So I've got a bit of an analogy here for you to help you understand exactly more what it involves. So imagine you've picked up an injury at the gym, or you've gone out for a run and you've hurt yourself. or you've been playing sport, you will know that once that injury has started to heal a little bit, the doctor will advise you to start doing some light exercise on it. So they might say, you know, go for a swim or go on the bike at the gym to kind of start using the muscles again gently, but not going full throttle on them. So this will encourage those injured muscles to have a bit of blood flow pumping through them, and it will actually speed up their recovery. Okay. But without, and this is the key thing, imposing unnecessary stress on them, which is why the doctor doesn't say, oh yeah, it's started to heal, you can get straight back out and go for a run again. There's always that kind of light introduction there. We can apply this theory to our poor, overworked brains that are just like, whoa, don't know what they're doing. But similarly, in the way that you would with a bad leg, you need to build it up gradually, okay, rather than just going full throttle. And we do this by teaching our brains how to slow down rather than just slamming the brakes on. So if you know, a lot of people say, oh yeah, you know, you're stressed, you must try meditation. And for me personally, I would imagine you as well, you know, sitting in a quiet room trying to get all your thoughts to disappear was just so impossible because you just had so much going on there. And that for me really felt like slamming the brakes on, which was a really, really uncomfortable feeling. Okay, so you know, you will really struggle to switch off if you try that. And then you will end up telling yourself that actually you can't do meditation, which is exactly what happened to me. And then you will just give up and you'll be no further forward on the, you know, trying to fix the problem of feeling stressed and overwhelmed. Okay. And so that cycle of feeling overwhelmed just perpetuates and you kind of never find yourself actually getting a solution. This is because your brain is used to being so jam-packed. Okay, so imagine for an example, if you had a toddler or a dog, okay, and every day at the same time you gave them their lunch. Okay, so every day at midday they had their lunch, and one day out of the blue you decided to change their lunchtime to 1 p.m. okay, it would get to midday and all hell would break loose because that child or puppy has been conditioned to eat their lunch at that time every day. Okay, this is exactly what you have trained your brain to do. Okay, just as you've trained your child or your pet to have that lunch at the same time every day, you have trained your brain to be constantly jam-packed full of thoughts. Okay, so that's normal for it, that's what it expects. So then for you to suddenly be like, oh, you've got to empty all of that, the brain's like, oh my good God, I don't know what is going on here. Okay, so it understandably it finds it really difficult to do that. So active rest activities are a really good halfway house for this because they ensure that the brain gets a chance to rest, but it stays active enough so it doesn't have that like complete silence, which it just doesn't know what to do with. Okay, but the key is that these activities keep your brain active enough, but not so active that it becomes stressed and gets into that stress level. So you know, pretty much all gardening activities are a form of active rest, some more than others, because I think the repetitive nature of some of the activities really helps to accelerate this state of active rest. But you know, it is mainly down to the fact that most of them, the first time you do the activity, your brain is kind of learning the activity. So weeding, for example, or seed sowing. But once you kind of start to do that activity, you know, more and more and more, your brain you know, is kept in that active state, but actually it doesn't need to think too much about it like it would if maybe you were reading a book or something. It would have to be constantly quite active, but it allows you to get into that flow state, which really allows you to access that kind of calm and headspace, which is what we're aiming for. Okay, so that's why active rest is so useful. So the last thing I want to talk about is a few ways to rest your busy brain that don't involve sitting doing nothing. Now, obviously, this is a mindful gardening membership or program, so gardening is a brilliant one, but you know, there are days when you maybe don't fancy getting out in the garden. It's cold or snowing, as it was yesterday, and you just don't really fancy it. So I wanted to share a couple of other things that are also really great active rest activities. So things like puzzles are really good. They're not too challenging for the brain, and they're, again, relatively repetitive in their nature. Crafting is a really, really good thing. So things like cross stitch, knitting, crochet, anything like that, anything that you're kind of doing with your hands is always going to be a really good option. Colouring is a brilliant one, because realistically the only decisions you need to make are which shape are you going to colour in and what colour are you going to do it. So, you know, what I quite like to do, I've got one of those sort of adult colouring books, and I just pick a colour and I just kind of dot all over the page and just, you know, colour in different shapes here and there, and I just don't think too much about it, and I just kind of let it go. And the beauty of those patterns, they tend to be patterns rather than images more, is that it doesn't really, they kind of encourage that kind of switch off of the brain, so you're not having to overthink about, you know, oh well, this person, this is their hand, so it must be skin colored. You know, you can't overthink it too much. You can just kind of color at will without having to stick to a pattern. And then the last one that I've also found really useful is pottery. So my husband got me pottery, well, both of us pottery lessons a few years ago. And that was wonderful, actually. Like after a really stressful day at work, to go and just be there and throw a pot, that was super mindful and meditative in its own way, because, you know, you're there on the wheel and the wheel's spinning round. So that is a really, really great option as well. But generally anything that's kind of crafty, where you can engage your senses to really help you get into that flow state and that active rest activity, then that is going to be really, really useful. So for homework then, I don't want it to be too onerous. I know you are all busy women, but I think it's really important that that I hold you accountable for the fact that you're in this program and you want to be able to switch off more easily. So I would love for you to post either in the Facebook group, or you can DM me if you feel more comfortable with that. But I'd love for you to share some of the unhelpful coping methods that you have been utilizing up until now, and that you recognize in yourself, and that you would like to try and reduce if you can, and some of the helpful coping methods that you plan to try over the next month to replace them. Because you know, if you don't replace them with something helpful, you will just revert to the unhelpful ones. So for me personally, I would like to cut down on my caffeine consumption. I think I had about 6 cups of tea yesterday. I think mainly because it's so cold, that's what I'm telling myself, but actually there's certainly an element of comfort in it for me. And also, you know, I probably am a little bit addicted to caffeine, so I'm going to try and reduce my consumption on that. I'm going to have 1 coffee in the morning and allow myself a cup of tea in the afternoon. And other than that, I'm going to be drinking good old H2O for the rest of it. I'm doing okay so far. I also am going to try and be more mindful when I eat, so I don't overeat quite so much, because I think it's really easy to sit in front of the television and kind of be focusing on that. So you're just kind of shoveling food into your face, and then actually you feel really full and uncomfortable afterwards. So I'm going to try and be a little bit more mindful with my food consumption, and not, you know, quite often of an afternoon I'll find myself kind of 3 o'clock thinking, oh, you know, I feel a bit like I need an energy boost. I'm going to eat something sweet from the cupboard. And I'm going to try and reduce that a little bit. And instead, before I do that and I have that sweet thing, I'm going to go out in the garden and try and get a natural reduction in stress by doing a little bit of gardening, and also a bit of fresh air to kind of give me that energy boost as well. So that is my plans going forward. I'm also going to try and be more aware of recognizing when I exhibit these unhelpful coping methods, and speak to my husband about the fact that I've noticed I'm doing it, in the hope that he can not, I guess, hold me accountable a little bit, but, you know, just, and not in a way of like, oh, you know, you shouldn't be eating that, but just to be aware. Because I think if if he's aware of it as well, that I'm feeling stressed and overloaded, then I think you know, it just makes everybody's life a little bit easier, doesn't it? So yeah, I would love for you to share either in the group or with me directly what changes you would like to make as well. But other than that, happy gardening, and yeah, let me know how you get on. Bye.